Darth Maul's life is nothing but irony and disappointment, in what I think is a really interesting way. One of my worries with Shadowlord was that the show would try to do something we see fairly often with Star Wars villains as they become more established. You often start getting backstory or character expansion which is done not just to give them depth and motivation, but to try to justify their actions, or pretend they were never actually that villainous at all. I've done a few videos on this in the past, and this doesn't mean that villains can't be protagonists within a specific story. I think one thing Maul does really well is walk this line, keeping him as a rootable character within the context of the series, highlighting the reasons he is how he is, and then still making sure not to claim he's actually a good guy or that his backstory justifies the things he's doing. We see throughout the series, and in his prior appearances in Clone Wars and Rebels, how much his desire for revenge on Sidious fuels him. But this is taken in two new and ironically competing directions in Shadowlord. Well, sort of new. First, we have the relationship with Devon and the attempts to turn her into a new apprentice, while a Jedi Master looks on disapprovingly. This is something we have seen already with Ezra in Rebels, but I think in Shadowlord with Devon, we see a lot more of how Maul shapes the context in which Devon is able to make her decisions. Second, we have a motivation for Maul's revenge expressed beyond simply the personal "you wronged me" element, when he says he wants to make sure Sidious is never able to do that to anyone else again. And I think if he weren't a cartoon character and lie detectors weren't pseudoscience, if you were able to put Maul through a lie detector test, Maury Povich would declare that this statement from Maul is actually the truth as he sees it. This is something we see expressed in private when Maul is thinking about some of the worst moments of his life. It's not something that he is intentionally saying to manipulate someone else, so I think it's something that he believes. But this element of Maul's motivations has to be considered in the context of his own experience and what he is willing to do to accomplish his goals. There's some significant cognitive dissonance going on for him here. We see throughout the show how he wants to convince Devon to join him, and he really wants to position this as having been her choice. He thinks he's being really magnanimous about it. But fundamentally, he just can't take no for an answer. As soon as he learns she's not going to make the choice he wants, he pushes things more and more to favor the outcome he wants, and will physically trap her if necessary. He may not be forcing things to the same extent as Sidious did in taking and manipulating him growing up, but especially by the finale of the show, where Maul makes sure Vader will be able to kill off Master Daki once it's clear that Maul and Daki together can't prevail over the new Sith Lord, he's doing this because he knows this is a move which will push Devon fully under his sway, and I don't think he sees the parallels between his manipulation of her and the exact things he's saying he will never allow Palpatine to do to anyone else. The way that Maul would probably frame this would be to say that, ultimately, getting rid of the Emperor is what's good for her as well. So it's not just about getting someone to serve him for his own power, the way that he, when he was younger, the Inquisitors, and now Vader, are being molded solely for service under Palpatine, but is different in degree, if not necessarily in kind. What Devon originally found enticing about Maul's offers was the ability to fight back against the Emperor compared to what was being offered by Master Daki, whose short-term goal, at least, was geared more towards their own survival rather than helping the other people oppressed by the Empire. But Maul isn't really one to actually care for collateral damage that much or the state of the galaxy writ large. Despite his problems with Palpatine and the fact that Maul himself is not a Sith anymore, strictly speaking, he's still been molded by his experience under Palpatine and within Sith teachings. No matter what nobility he wants to assign to his motivation for revenge, he's ultimately concerned with growing his own power, not with protection of anyone else. And now the greatest thing linking Maul to Devon's goals is a desire for revenge, not the fulfillment of her prior, somewhat more idealistic goals. Considering his role in bringing about Master Daki's death, we also know this is a partnership built on a lie, which will almost certainly be exposed at some point, probably when Maul tries to convince Devon to like this video and subscribe for more. But this motivation for revenge that Maul is trying to push her towards would equally as legitimately be applied against him as against Vader and Sidious. At least as far as her master goes, if not the Jedi Order and the Republic as a whole. Throughout the latter bits of the season, with the appearance of the Inquisitors, we see Maul kind of pity the Inquisitors as being under Palpatine's thrall, similarly to how he was. And Dave Filoni commented on some of the comparisons between Maul and Vader in the finale as well. Filoni calls Maul a broken, scrambling version of evil, while Vader is more powerful and more of a weapon for the Emperor. So to some extent, if not for the fact that he's getting his butt handed to him by Vader, that pity would probably extend to Vader from Maul as well. If it were up to him, though, Maul would probably be happy to use his own underlings the same way. We do see him have a stronger emotional connection to his servants. He's genuinely upset when they're hurt or killed, but the most important thing for anyone is that they're still working towards his own goals and ends. Maul is never going to be someone who has a lot of sympathy or empathy or just time in general for people who are not working towards his same ends and goals. So again, his separation from Palpatine comes more in degree than in kind. At the core of Maul's character, alongside his curse to always fail at pretty much everything he does, causing him to always need to roll the crime lord boulder up the underworld hill, is something of a lack of self-awareness, which he'll almost certainly never interrogate, and which I also think is how he ends up becoming a compelling character while still avoiding any true redemption, whether retroactive as a kind of imposed retcon, or gained over time through actual character growth. I still think Devon is going to be the vehicle for story progression as Maul Shadowlord enters Season 2, but there's still more to see with how Maul himself might view the things he's doing before we end up with him stranded on Malachor and ultimately killed by Obi-Wan with this hope that someone will finally stop Palpatine. If there is somewhere for him to have some level of internal personal growth, it would be in seeing the parallels between how he is treating Devon here and how Palpatine would have brought him up. I'm curious to see if there'll be any evolution in his relationship with Devon that impacts or recontextualizes how we saw him interact with Ezra already in Rebels. I think as long as the show keeps these two things in mind, one being that he genuinely wants to stop Palpatine for reasons which include a kind of twisted altruism, and two, that he's ultimately a force for chaotic selfishness, the character will still have some interesting things to offer in future seasons. And to be clear, I'm not against the idea of redemption in general within character arcs. There are a lot of character arcs that handle this really well, especially in the Alphabet Squadron series. But Maul is a character where we know the starting point and we know the ending point, so having him change too much in the middle would be more of an issue than in other situations. We ultimately know where he ends up, and that there's no hope for a real long-lasting turnaround for him, but the impact he has on Devon is still up in the air, as long as future media is able and willing to run with that. The fact that Devon's gone by the time he's on Malachor and he's looking for some new vessel to carry forward the fight probably gives us some hints as to how successful he is in corrupting Devon long term, but I'm definitely interested to see where that ends up. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments what you've thought of Maul Shadowlord Season 1 and any predictions you might have for the show going forward into Season 2, and I hope to see you next time.